Hey everyone, good morning, how are you? It's nice to see you here. I'm very excited to start this class. As we said yesterday, this class is pre-recorded. We recorded this a few days
Hey everyone,
ago.
good morning,
And the
how are
reason
you?
why
It's
is
nice
because
to
we
see
can
you
compress
here.
more
I'm very excited
information
to
for
start
you.
this
We
class.
edited this
As
so
we
you get
said
the most.
yesterday, this
Again,
class
we are
is
still
pre-recorded. We
active.
recorded
We
this
are
a
live
few
in
days
the
ago.
chat,
Hey everyone,
asking
good
questions.
morning, how are
We
you?
will
It's
respond
nice
the
to
questions
see you
right there
here.
if we can
I'm
give you the
very excited to
information,
start
or
this
we will
class.
point you
As
either
we
to
said
content that you
yesterday,
have access to or to classes that we're gonna be doing in the next following days. All right, with that being said, we are having classes every day. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Then we have the Friday. Remember that on Friday we have the live Q&A. That obviously is going to be live on Zoom. So we can interact and we can talk about the things that we have learned over the past 4 days. That's going to be on Friday. Remember, you've got all the information in the calendar. Check out the calendar and you'll receive emails with all the date and times, etc. On top of that, we've got the master classes. Master classes usually start at some point when the morning classes end. We have the master classes. Usually it's around noon or starting a little bit before noon. Again, check out the calendar. The master classes are not every day. They are spread across this next month. Let's get started. So yesterday we talked about how to configure your workspace and your DAW to work fast, to work efficiently. Today it is the same concept, but it's about templates. But it's still same philosophy. It's speed and efficiency. All right. I don't care if you've got a small, very effective template or a large template, as long as that template is effective for you. Right? My recommendation is always the same. Do not create a template so you have all the tracks that you may or may not need. Have a template that works for you. And I always recommend the same thing. Start with something small, and then as you are composing, as you are working on projects, and you see the need of specific tracks or instruments or sounds or synths, then add those, right? And add them in a way that works for you, because everyone has a different workflow, all right? So that's it. Today we're talking about templates. Quick preview or some of the topics that we're going to be talking here is basically how to create a template that is useful, that allows you to compose fast and efficiently. I'll show you exactly what patches I think would be a great starting patches or instruments or sounds for you to have in a small template. The template's going to have 3 sections. We're going to have the fast action patches, or the kind of like the sketching patches. Then we're going to have strings, basics, and then we're going to have the orchestral enhancers. And with that's going to be like 30, 40 tracks max, something like this, 60 for some of you maybe. But with that, you will be able to compose 80% of the music that or 80% of the music that we could encapsulate within sort of like the cinematic orchestral type of music. All right, that's it. Let's get started. See you there.
So this is an empty project, and now basically I'm gonna load one track, like literally one track, one sampler, meaning one track, one contact. Or one track, one play, or one track, one zebra, right? One synth, one sampler. So with Cubase, when you go here, my template, my big template, each contact instance has the complex thing. It has the 16 instruments, the 16 patches loaded in there, and then the 16 MIDI inputs in the 16 stereo audio outputs. Let's not do that now. Let's keep it even more simple, right? So now I'm gonna add just an instrument track. Add instrument track, and that's it. Okay. And the sampler that I'm gonna use is gonna be contact in this case. Because I'm gonna load the instrument in here. It's the thing that I use for loading patches. And basically, if it's the first time that you'll buy, the first time that you buy a library, let's say that you go there, it's like, okay, I'm gonna buy Albion, or I already have some stuff. Then you'll know they'll tell you, hey, this library loads on contact. You need contact, right? And then you know that you need contact. If it was like Cubase, like a Cubase instrument that comes with Cubase, it'll have its own sampler. So in this case, I'm gonna use contact. Edit load contact, and that's it. Boom. Here's my track. And I don't have to worry about routing or anything like that. it's just there. I just have to load. And I'm gonna start with the basics. I'm gonna load a string short high, string short low. So string short notes high, string short notes low notes. And then same thing with brass and with woodwinds. Let's just start with that. So I'm gonna go here to my, these are my libraries here. And up here in my, so this is my studio. I've got my computer right here. And then downstairs I've got another computer. It's my server computer. At the moment, I'm not gonna do any of this. I'm just gonna keep everything in one computer. And that's it. To keep things even simpler, in my main computer, because I usually don't load samples in my main computer, I load them in my server computer. But when I do load them here, I store like 90% of my libraries in 1 2 terabyte hard drive. Just makes things simpler. So this is my 2 terabyte SSD, so solid state drive. And here are all my libraries. So I'm gonna go to Spitfire here. Spitfire, and then I'm gonna go to Albion, Spitfire Albion, and I'm gonna click here, instruments. There's an easier way to do this. Once you install Albion, you could go here, library. It'll show up here. Where is it? Here, and then just browse, and then Albion Orchestra, strings high, and then I'm gonna go for. So Albion, ALB it's Albion, B1, B2, BA it's violin 1, violin 2, viola, right? Section, so basically high strings. We've got high strings and low strings. High strings are the violins section and the viola section. That's the high strings. And then the low strings are the cellos and double basses, like the big size instruments. And so I'm gonna grab the violin 1, violin 2, and viola short. TM stands for time machine, and I'll show you in a second what that means. What this means is, well, I just loaded this guy. All right, we've got sound. Cool. So that's it. The time machine thing is this little thing that they've got here, where you can do stuff like this. So I just wrote this, and then you just activate it like this, and then it. Right, it does this thing for you. That's the TM. All right, you got it. Just gonna get rid of this because I'm not gonna use it most of the times. I could, but I'm not gonna use it. So one track, I loaded the sampler. This guy is the sampler, so contact. And inside contact, I loaded this patch. I just browse it. And now it's gonna get boring because I'm gonna be repeating this process several times. But I'm gonna be taking decisions, so it should be interesting. So I'm gonna name this as strings. I could name it as violin 1, violin 2, viola. I'm gonna name it as strings high, short, or strings, strings short, high. And then what I'm gonna do is, so I don't have to repeat some of the steps, just hit right click, duplicate track. And what's gonna do here is the process that just happened background is it duplicated the track, but it also in the track it loaded contacts. See, if I go to this track and I click to this little small edit instrument, this thing is what opens contact. So you'll see this is the contact. This is a separate contact now. See? It's like these two different instruments. It just happens to, it loaded the same pads because I just duplicated the track. In this case, let me see which one it is. It's this one, I believe. In this case, I'm gonna replace this now with, in this case, it's gonna be low string. So I'm gonna go here, browse, and in this case, it's gonna be not strings high. It's gonna be, I'm gonna give the name short. Strings low, and then we're gonna go the same thing, short strings So short here, same thing, this one. Albion strings low, short, TM. So in this case, now I'm gonna replace it. See, in the past, I would load the patches underneath and I would route them. But in this case, because every track is a separate sampler, it's simpler. Now, here. So this is the new guy, short, low. Low. Cool, all right. So that's that. And now, as you can see, we've got two. This one is this one, and this one is this one. Strings high, strings low. Comes with Time Machine as well, but whatever, you could not use it. So that's that. With Cubase, you can do the multi-instrument and still do automation in each one of these internal tracks in that multi-instrument. Yes, and with Logic, you should be able to, and the way to do it, the method, is, and I used Logic. I used Logic in the past, and that's how I did it. And now a student did the video for us. But here's like, but if you go to cinematic composing and then you go to the SBO course, you don't even have to go to the SBO course. But if you go here, in fact, FAQ. If you just log in, go to the FAQ, and then scroll down, it's gonna look a little bit different for you. But if you go down here, how to set up multi-instruments in Logic Pro, so you can have independent automation in each one of these 16 tracks, that would be the way to do it. There are 2 videos that explain how to set that up. So yeah, take a look, see if it's something different to what you do, and if it makes sense to you. If it doesn't, it still doesn't work, if you could get back to me, I'll try to help you. Oh, fantastic. Cool. So that's that. Let's keep moving. So we've got high strings. We do? Yeah. We don't. What? And the not working is maybe because we've got this active, is still active. Yes. Boom, boom, boom. So careful with the Time Machine thing. Alright, cool. So let's keep moving. So to duplicate tracks. Okay, duplicate tracks. I think you can do this. Boom. All right. So this is gonna be woodwinds, short, high, woodwinds, short, low, and then we've got brass, short, high, brass, short, low, and that's what we're gonna do. So for woodwinds, I'm gonna go here, gonna open this guy, gonna go again down here, gonna load Albion, boom, 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 and short. So we've got 2 here in this case. You will choose the one that you like the most. So basically what they did is, because woodwinds short notes, it's basically the orchestrator orchestrated a short note. So we're gonna have, let's say we're gonna have 2 flutes, opened in octaves, and then we're gonna have interleaved the oboes in between, blah blah blah. So the short notes sound that you get, like the orchestration in Albion, the sound is different than, let's say, Hollywood woodwinds, like Hollywood woodwinds from Cinesamples. The woodwinds sound, not the room sounds, obviously 2 different rooms, but you get a more homogeneous sound, for example, with Albion, just the way it is, and a more heterogeneous sound with Cinesamples Hollywood woodwinds. You get a little bit more of the double reed sound with Cinesamples again, a little bit more of flutes and clarinets sound with Albion. So I would in my case, in my template, not this one, my template, I have both loaded in different places in my template. I know it's a different sound, so depending on what I need, what I want, I'll load one or another. And in this case, in here, you have two different patches. You've got the woodwind high string short, then woodwind high string short, two flutes, two FLs, two flutes. So I'm gonna load this one here, but you would, so don't overthink it at the beginning. Don't think that the template has to be perfect. In fact, you know, having a template, you've got two options. You either know your template very well and you adapt it to what you need and your style of writing, or you have everything that you need, which means, you know, you need more RAM and a big, more powerful computer because you're gonna load everything that the library gives you, which is a lot generally. So you're gonna load a lot of RAM and all that. Or the other option is keep it super small and then load tracks as you need it. Now, what happens when you load the track is that you see the options, and then depending on what you're writing, you're gonna choose the best match. I'm gonna move this here. All right, so let's see. Just out of curiosity, let me just see how this one sounds. Come on. Slightly different, not that much difference. All right, cool. So we've got this guy here, and now we're gonna go here. And again, so Albion is an option. There are other options. This one is not, it's not super, it's, for a library, it's not that expensive. It doesn't load that much RAM, sounds great. So I highly recommend this one. Woodwinds low, short, TM again, okay. Let's see, real quick difference. So TM loads 66 gigs of RAM, non-TM, same? No, 23, so see? It would make a lot of sense to, if you're not gonna use this guy here where it repeats the notes and creates the patterns for you, to load the non-TM. It's just 3 times less amount of RAM, which as the template grows, makes a big difference. Sometimes you're like, I'm just gonna have the TM because it's a longer name, has to be better, or it gives me more options or whatever, right? And then you choose. Another thing, when optimizing, so we're down to optimizing. Sometimes we're like, I'm gonna have all the mics loaded. I'm gonna just show you real quick what this means. See, as the RAM goes up, so basically these are the mics, close, tree, and then the different far mics. I've got different naming, but, and then you're like, because I'm gonna be able to combine different mics in different amounts, basically this is gonna give me a different sound. You see, if I want the close mics, then it's gonna sound. So close sound. Let me just real quick stereo out. I'm gonna insert. You're not seeing this, but I'm gonna insert the maximizer. Just waves. Let's do this. So super. See, there's this one repetition where the contrabassoon and the bassoon, they don't play exactly on time. Right there, the last one. And you can see they recorded 4 repetitions, which means the round robin thing to avoid machine gun effect, especially for short notes. They record several short notes, several staccatos. So when we do ta 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 ta, it sounds like a real person actually performing that note. It's gonna sound different each time. So you can see, you can hear the 4 repetitions. There's no more than 4. Ting 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 takang. The 4th one is very different. So. You get, if you would repeat more than 4 times, like ta 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 ta, it starts getting repetitive because you can hear those 4 different sounds, just 4. There are some libraries, most of libraries will record 8. The more you record, the more RAM. that the library is gonna need to load. In this case, they recorded 4, at least for in this case for the low woodwinds. It's not that big of a deal because low woodwinds usually gonna be doubling with low strings most of the times, and so you're not gonna hear that. It's not gonna be that problematic. Anyway, so that's short. And if you wanted to load all the mics, where is it here? See this one. I'm just gonna bring this one a little bit. Okay. So 92 instead of 20 something. And if you have the TM that has 60, 4 times would be 240 gigs, megabyte of RAM. So it's a quarter of gig of RAM, which is already quite a lot. So if you had a powerful computer with 64 gigs of RAM, you know, 1/4 of gig is already something that's using a space, just one patch. So that would be the short. This is the room. This is the cinematic sound. This is the orchestral sound. This is the, you know, you don't have to do, in general, I go like this. And those are the different, you know, farther and farther mics. So this is another one. Alright, so there you go. I'm gonna keep it simple now. Just wanted to give you a brief overview of this. So, and then we've got brass, and there we go. So for brass, we'll go down here. Sometimes when I'm doing, as I'm doing this, I wish my template didn't have that much complexity. And we just keep it super simple like this. Just grab one track, open the instrument, tweak it, and then instead of having to go 3 or 4 layers of routing and then opening a remote window, go to my second computer, go to Vienna, find the instance, find the instance in Vienna, find the instance in Contact, open the scroll, find the patch. You can obviously simplify all that. This computer is 128. So at the moment we're using 12 gigs of RAM. So I don't know how far you could get. I've never. It's a big task to replicate my template that has, I don't know, 400, 500, to replicate that just to see how it performs, to load everything. Like what I have is, maybe I have like 20 instances or 30 instances of Contact, 16 patches in each one of the instances. I don't know how my CPU, I would have to test the other option, which is instead of 30 instances with 16 instruments each, total of, let's say, 500, whatever it is, tracks, compared to 500 instances of Contact with one patch, just one patch in each one of these instances. I don't know how that works, because there's a lot of theory behind it and a lot of discussion in forums. But at the end of the day, it's just doing it with your template and see what happens with your template, your computer, your instruments, your patches, and your plugins and everything. So brass. Did I load it? No, I did not. Brass. So brass, high, short. Let me just try TM. But you could not load TM. So this is the thing about Albion. It has a ton of reverb. Just so that's that. And most of the times that's what we want. But there you go. Anyway, I'm gonna discuss libraries here. So this is this. And now, boom, boom. Boom, so that's that. If you got all these short, no, yeah, all of them. So, now, the thing that I would do, tweaking. Alright, so I do not have control over, and to me, that is super important. To me, this guy controls modulation, which is, let me just load, this is, would be brass, boom. This would be strings, long, high, and I'm gonna load them real quick. Strings. Not the legatos, we're gonna go the long, not the consordino, CS consordino, not these ones, but rather these ones, so 13. Right, so basically what's happening now is this guy, modulation, it is controlling the crossfading between the different dynamic layers. So piano to forte sort of thing, right? And that's cool, but I prefer two things. I prefer having control over expression, which is CC11, for two reasons. One, it helps me, you know, when I'm moving them in the slightly same direction, it helps me, maybe I'm doing like the full movement of this one to go from pianissimo to fortissimo, and this one is going from, you know, from 33% sort of thing to 66%, and it's just enhancing dynamics a little bit, just helping the thing. So that's one thing, and the other thing is if I bring it down all the way down, then I can control volume, I can go from niente, so it opens a new set of possibilities. Now this thing is doing nothing. So most of libraries do respond to expression, meaning expression controls volume. In this library, it seems it is not controlling volume. So what I'm gonna do is, and here's how you do it in Contact. You'll go here, and then we'll click here, and it opens this thing here. And so I'm gonna close all of these guys. I'm gonna close, if any of these is open, I'm gonna close it because it just makes things even more complicated. Now, the only thing that you wanna make sure is that group editor, that's the kicker, group editor, edit all. So edit all, meaning all of them. Make sure it's red. And then you can close this one, and then you'll find this amplifier section, modulation, and then we'll scroll down, add modulator. Okay, so that's amplifier, modulator, and then if it's closed, then open it, and then add modulator, external sources, MIDI CC, and then you're gonna add your MIDI, but you have to make sure that all this, because this means this is gonna affect all groups and all samples, every note sort of thing. So 11 minus 1, and that's it. All right, now this guy controls volume, like even if I'm performing forte and I go here, I hear nothing, and then I bring it up. It sounds forte, that the timbre of it is they performing forte, just I still obviously can control the dynamics, so I can go from pianissimo or from niente. From niente is very important. From niente is from nothing. And for the strings, it's very important that you can actually do that. And if you didn't have control here, then you can go from pianissimo, but you cannot go from niente. That's just at the end, which the string is, you know, the string section can perform. It, you know, with just with dynamics, it won't sound the same. Doesn't have the same kick at the end. So those small little things make a difference. To me, it's, yes, the libraries are important, obviously, but it's also how you perform them. If you clicked here and learn MIDI CC and you moved any fader, then you could have, this guy here just learned that this fader is gonna move it, right? And you could do that, definitely. And the reason why I don't do that, and there is no reason why I haven't done it with this setup. With my other setup, where I have many patches, most of those patches are balanced in contact, meaning the balance is right, the volume, the orchestral balance is right in contact. So if I'm creating a new template, or I'm working with another sequencer, or I'm working with another composer, because I have groups, because I have different contact instances with groups of tracks inside contact, if I need to give them, hey, I want you to have the same shorter strings that I have, I save my contact instance with balance and panning and everything, volumes, express everything, and I send that to my, you know, let's say my assistant or a composer that I'm working with in this movie, and they have the exact same sounds, exact same balance, exact same everything that I have. If I did this, and every time that I'm performing a patch, I'm doing this, let's say boom, like this, and I'm changing this volume, then I'm losing the balance in contact, the way I organize things in contact, which is perfectly okay. But for me, the way I have things organized, it wasn't an option. But you could do that. I did that for the longest time initially, until I created this more complex template. So those are, so here we've got this. So I'm gonna move real quick, and I'm gonna duplicate, and duplicate, and duplicate. So, and you can organize this the way you want it, but just there we go. I'm just gonna go here, browse. Long notes. All right, wins. So real quick, the difference. So the difference between the long notes, like this is the low woodwinds, I believe. It's because it's just basically they sample the woodwinds performing these long notes in this case. And right there was the connection. They record 6, 8 seconds, whatever, and then they just loop that note. They loop them. So there's a moment where you can sometimes you can hear the connection. You don't hear a click or anything like that. You hear more like. So the way you do it is just you zoom in. That's if you are building a library and you're recording your own long notes, let's say, you just record the long note, but then you need that long note to last forever. So the way you do it, you record the long note and then just loop it. You have to tell the sampler where to loop it. And basically what you're gonna do is like you're gonna zoom in, and when you see the waveform and you see going up and down, you zoom it at that level, going up and down, and towards the end, at some point where it goes down in the middle, and there's where you cut it. And then you find somewhere at the beginning of the note, and you're gonna tell the sampler, this is the point where when it loops, not the first time when you press the note, because when you press the note, you want the attack. But when it loops, it's gonna start, and then you find a place towards the beginning where it starts from, the waveform starts from the middle, but going down. And that's where you're gonna connect. So you don't hear the click. It's not like it's not like the long note and click every loop, but sometimes you can hear how maybe they were performing that piano note, but towards the end maybe it sounded a little bit louder or a little bit softer than 8 seconds ago when they started. So you can hear that. So that's what a long note is. So long notes is basically just long recordings, a note that they perform for 4, 6, 8 seconds. And if you press 2 keys, then you've got this one note and the second. All right. That's it. Now, if you instead chose this legato patch, it's a different story. What they do in this case, basically, it's a different patch, right? When you press the first note, it's the same recording. Usually, it's the same recording. Now, I'm gonna press the second note, it's gonna go from this one to this one. All right, and basically, it just goes from one note to the other. Now, with synths, then in the legato patches, you can decide the glide, right? You can decide how much you want this. See, would be you don't see, okay. So this would be a synth, right? So this part here, you don't see it anyway. Just believe me. It's glide time. Glide time means that when I press this is a synth. This obviously is different, but this is like when I press the first note, when I press the second one, you stop the first note and go to the second one, but I want you to glide from the first note to, and then you'll specify how much glide you want. So that's in music, in orchestral music, that would be like go from, if you would bring down the glide time a lot, it would be just, it's a legato, go from one note to the second one as fast as possible, do, sort of thing, right? If I would bring the glide in a synth, again, on a synth, if I would bring up the glide time, then it would sound more like a portato. We call it portato in more like orchestral music, do, sort of thing, more like all the school, Hollywood, golden age Hollywood music sort of thing. And then if you would bring it up quite like a little bit more, then that would be a glissando, like do, and you can do those things as well. Now, in this case, this is a simple library. You don't have that much control. Let's say with LAS scoring strings, You've got control over these things or other libraries, and you can decide like fast legato, portato, or glissando. And in LA scoring strings, for example, you can control that with the pressure, the velocity, how you attack the second note. Low velocity is going to create glissando. Higher velocity, portato, and then highest velocity, legato. So how do they do that? Basically, they have the same set of recordings. They have those long notes recording. They recorded a long C, they recorded a long D, long E, every one of the notes at different volumes, different, so piano, pianissimo, so pianissimo, piano, etc. Mezzo forte, forte. And then they also recorded transition between the notes. So it's like, okay, now you gotta go to like the group of musicians. You guys are gonna go from C to D, from C to C sharp, from C to D, from C to D sharp, from C to E, etc. And they do all these, and then the same thing, from D to C sharp, from D to D, and they do all these combinations. So it takes forever, and it's a lot of fun for musicians. So they do all these combinations, and they basically, when they go from one note to the other, then they grab all these recordings and they chop it, and they grab, when they are building the library, the transition between the notes, and then they piece everything together. So basically what you hear is when you go from C to G, you'll hear that the sampler is triggering the first note. When I press the G, two things are going to happen. First, it's going to stop the first note, it's going to stop the sampler, it's going to stop the note, then it's going to trigger the transition from C to G, and then it's going to trigger the last note. It's going to connect everything. I think it's... And sometimes it feels more natural, so sometimes it's not as natural. It sounds natural. Right here it sounds like whine. If I was doing this over and over, it sounds repetitive. Remember that the 4 repetition round robin, the 4 different short notes that they recorded, so it doesn't sound repetitive. In this case, the legato transition, they usually just record it once because you're not doing this. But if you have to, if you have to go do, oi, go back and forth like. Sample libraries sound horrible in general because they didn't record the round robin of the transition. Maybe they have a couple or 4 long notes recorded, which in this case they don't. But if the more of these, the more expensive the library. So there you go. The transition they just recorded once, and that's what it sounds. That's why it sounds repetitive. But still, the transition sounds beautiful. But you cannot perform 2 notes at the same time here because it's a legato patch. That's the difference between the legato patch and the sustain and the long notes patch. This is not mandatory for you to know, but just that's what goes behind. That's what goes behind this, and that's why you can perform 2 notes, unless it's a polylegato type of patch. And some libraries do allow you to, if you press this note and then this note, then it'll do the legato. But then if you press 3 notes at the same time, it'll perform long notes. So this is a little bit more advanced library. So Cinestrings does that, the Cinebrass does that, LA scoring strings, you can do that as well, and these things with the BC patches. So that's it. Sometimes the legato sounds more natural, sometimes it doesn't that much. With Albion, in general, they sound great. So going back to long notes, because in this case, what we want to be able to do is to perform stuff like this. All right. Cool. All right, so, and then brass. Just to take a look at the general, well, just a note. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 patches. Now, if that's with brass high. With the strings, usually there's many more patches, many more options. Just because with the strings we do so many more things. It's not that they can do more things than brass or anything like that. Just when it comes to optimizing the library, sometimes you find more patches with. And if you go to, let's say, woodwinds low, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and some of them it's almost repeated. It's just the short with time machine. So it's basically, it allows you to do, and then it has legato, long, short, and effects. So 4 patches basically they gave us for woodwinds low. As for strings high, we got so many other options. We have the effects, more effects. And then we've got the octaves, so we've got the same, we've got the short, long, and the legatos, the same thing with octaves, short, long legatos with octaves. Then we've got ostinatum, and then we have pizzicatos, and that's about it. So we've got more things. We could have I don't know, different types of sordino, concertino, and mutes, sorry, for brass, which we don't have. But again, this is not a library that has every single articulation and possible, option. So so long, right? Yep. Long legato, long notes. Yes. And then you are gonna be. Sometimes instead of scroll down all the time, but what I do is just I open a window here. I just drag it every time. Yep. Cool. And then this one. Oh no! So did. Yeah, cool. Sorry. Lows, sorry. Low, long, boom. My bad. Should have replaced it on top. Oh, another thing, and that's what makes a library more or less realistic or easier to play or stuff like that. What I have here, this is the way they record this. It's a long note, right? The loop just came right there. Now, because they don't know when you're gonna stop, but it has to sound natural when you stop. They can't cut the note do, because it's gonna, when when a horn player stops a note, they stop the note. They stop blowing, and the horn resonates because of the air pressure that stops, blowing through the tubes and all that. Well, it's not like the sound disappears. It's the instrument decompresses, and the stopping of the sound vibrates different. So you want to capture that when you are creating a library, so the library sounds realistic. So that's what they do. They have the section or the instrument performing, and then when they stop, they isolate that stopping part, and that's the release of the note. So when you go up, and you can see that there are 4 notes going on at the same time. When I go up, there's a moment where there's the release note. So for whatever reason, there are 4 samples going on at this. For sure, there are 2 because of these 2 mics. 2 notes. For whatever reason, this patch. I shouldn't go in here. Anyway, for whatever reason, this note that we hear as one note, for them in the background, they built it with two samples. Anyway, there are two notes. Usually there's one, but two notes. As we release, you're gonna see three for a second, which is the moment that they triggered the release note plus the two notes that we had, three notes total. So that release is a very short right? Or it's when the piano, they record the piano release as well, because it's when the hammer, anyway. So the release note has to be as well, has to go with a different, so a release for pianissimo, release for piano, release for mezzo piano, release for mezzo forte, for fortissimo, for triple forte, all right? And so, but sometimes just when they try to bring down the amount of, like the size of the library, they record three releases, like piano, mezzo forte, and fortissimo. And then they use that release for the different, intermediate dynamics. They just bring down the volume, so it sort of matches. But sometimes the release is a little bit, a tad too loud. This one, see? And this one, clearly you can hear this. So, okay, you can hear. I'm just gonna bring this so you can hear. See, the brightness of the release, meaning how brassy it sounds. It's like more like a more distorted or broke, like boom, but it sounds like boom wah at the end. It's like the brass section was performing louder with this louder brass sound, which is not just louder in volume, but also has a more brassy sound. So what the release that you can hear is that type of sound, but so it doesn't sound like the real thing, like they performing louder and more brassy sound. They brought down the volume, so you can hear the ball with not a lot of brassy sound, like loud brass. When you release it, you can hear the wah thing, but they brought so these things what makes a library sound realistic or not. Anyway, just because we're doing things from scratch, I wanted to explain all these things. Cool. So we've gone for an hour and 10 minutes. We have the basic orchestral sounds. Now you could have a patch like the one that I have, and you could load orchestra short notes. I'm just gonna build it. I'm not gonna build the orchestra long notes, just the short notes. So I'm gonna duplicate this track, and I'm gonna make sure that this is the guy. Okay, so this is gonna be short. The cool thing about this, of doing things like this instead of doing things the way I teach, just like big template, one instance, 16 patches, and all that routing, is that if I want to do this, I can do this, and this is awesome. I can place it whatever I want, and it's okay because they're individual instrument tracks, and I don't care where I place them because it doesn't change the routing, it doesn't change anything. So that's a cool thing, and that's how it's supposed to be. But we just make things complicated as the template. As the template gets bigger, then it becomes, you have to optimize things, and then it becomes more complicated. But I may try it. I may build my template, 500 tracks, whatever it is, this way, and see if it still works. Because if it did, like 2 or 3, just contact changes as well, and it gets more optimized. It's supposed not to work, especially with Cubase. As you load 500 contacts, it'll break everything down. Anyway, so I'm gonna do this real quick. All right, so so strings high, short, without TM. Now, so 38 megabytes, and then I'm gonna go here. So shorter strings high, shorter strings low. So I'm gonna go here, low, shorter strings low, without TM, boom, here. Now the thing that I have to do is I have to make this 1. So the MIDI channel 1, and I'm gonna move this one down here. can make this small and small, and yeah, I'll do this patch and I'll explain a few things. So it's a good thing that I did it. I'll do woodwinds now, and it's gonna be short, high, in this case, flute short one. Make sure that's one. Because we want them, so what I'm doing now is a patch that when I hit the keyboard, it's like an orchestral sound, every section, short notes in this case, so that's what I'm doing. And it's just for simplicity. I could instead just select this, come on again. Wrong. So basically just record the same thing now. I've got this and what I can do in here now is I can go in here and I can control the volume and balance everything, but it would take me longer, right? It just gives me more control. It's like, hey, I want a little bit more of brass maybe, or I want the strings, or I can have the strings and woods major forte and brass forte, which it would be weird, but let's say that I want the brass a little bit unbalanced and I want them to perform a little bit louder. I would have control over those things. And if I set up every instrument the way I told, where I came here and I added expression to control volume, which most of these don't have at the moment, then I could actually go in each one of these patches and record the amount, which is in my tablet, it is the way I have it. And the first thing that I do when I record is let's like this. The first thing that I do before I record the notes is I record these two guys, right? And that gives me, well, in this case for short notes, I don't need this one because modulation affects cross-fading between dynamic layers, which means going from piano to major forte and all this. With long notes, it makes sense. With short notes, it does not because it's just one note, boom. And then you control the piano to major forte to forte with the velocity, how fast, how hard you hit the key. And so basically with short notes, with staccatos, the only thing that I need to set is expression. But again, most libraries, as you move this fader, the expression fader, you are controlling the volume of the patch, with Albion, they didn't do it. So with Albion, manually what I do is I repeat this. I go here and then I make sure that all selected, and then I go here to amplifier mod, and then I create this guy. And I set it. In this case, it's already created. -11, 11 and -1. And then I can control the volume of this patch using the expression CC, control change, MIDI CC. And that's what gives me the opportunity to control the volume in each one of the patches with this guy. It's not, I would have to set up. So for the low strings, they set it up. For the high strings, they did not. See, the libraries are not perfect. There are just a few companies that they release a library and it's perfect. Generally, they've got bugs, and well, they fix the bugs as they go. So with woodwinds high, it works. With woodwinds low, it works as well. You see? With brass high, it works. With brass low, it works. It's just I think it was, which one? Strings high, they didn't do it. So I'll just do it myself. So see, Albion does it actually. There are some patches that they forgot or whatever. I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna add amplifier mod, add mod, MIDI CC, level -1. So that's the way I do it. I don't know if there's, oh wait, that's the way I've always done it. Okay, so now what I would do is, if instead of, I'm gonna finish creating this patch later, but if I didn't want this because I don't want it, just a note. Once in your session, in your project, you have a contact that has one patch loaded. If you load another contact and you load the same patch, that should not affect your RAM memory because it's already loaded once somewhere in your project in another contact instance. So if you load it again, it will not make the total amount of RAM go up. So you could have technically the same patches that you have here, just stacked in a different instance, and it would not load, it wouldn't bring up the total amount of RAM that you're using in this project, in your template. Like let's say they've got the short TM and the short without TM, right? Like the time machine, then it does. If it's the exact same patch, here's the thing with the large template. When it works, and it's like I still have some like giga samples that I load in Contact, obviously, and I have all libraries like this one. I don't. It's just it was in my template. It works. It's part of a it's a multi-patch in a multi-instrument and blah blah blah. And it's like I don't wanna create the library because I'll have to reload patches here and there. I know it's not gonna work, etc. And so it's just that's what happens with an old template. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but it's not a great thing either, because it keeps you from improving and from changing things, because it just takes time. Sometimes we're lazy, you know. Complexity, I don't know. Complexity makes things, it just stops you from doing things that you would do. And Carlos was saying, Daniel James does it this way. He doesn't have the biggest template. But the cool thing about this, like, right, what we were talking about, I could have this track here or whatever, because it's, you know, we have individual tracks with individual. I think I'm gonna try having, but it's gonna crash. You know, people's tried this before. My 500 tracks template, just with individual tracks, and see what happens. But Cubase doesn't like this at all. You know, as you start having like more than 200 contact instances in Cubase is gonna say, I haven't been designed to handle that many samplers or synths. It's like, doesn't like, the algorithm doesn't like it, but still, maybe it works. So now you've got two options here. You could do this. One sec. In fact, right. So if I go in here, I should have. This is useless. But now I can control velocity. The two things that matter here basically are velocity and expression. Expression is just gonna control volume, and then velocity is gonna control how soft or loud they performed. So the timbre is gonna change volume. It's gonna change sound, like sound pressure, how loud it sounds or how soft it sounds, and the timbre as well. When they perform softer, it sounds mellower. When they perform louder, you get that brassy sound, right? So that you'll control with this. Now with this guy, you're gonna control the volume, so you can have the same thing but super. You know, you barely hear it, or which is like, but why do I need to control this if I want to keep the dynamics natural and all that? You always need to readjust things. Let's say that you've got orchestra and synths. How loud the orchestra against the synths, right? And so you're going to be adjusting these things. Or you could come here, right, and you could control the volume here in Logic or here. But I prefer balancing my template here, and then once it's balanced, the micro adjusting and the micro balancing goes here internally, like the internal, you know, orchestral micro balance. I prefer doing it here. So that would be one option, and now I have more control and I could come in here and tweak things. But sometimes those speed patches that I like the name that Thomas used. Sometimes it's even faster if you just have one patch that's already built and balanced and all that. You've got everything built in here. So violins one, so high strings, low strings, short notes, high woodwinds, low woodwinds, woodwinds low, short notes, and then I'm gonna deal with routing in a sec, and then brass, just not that many, sorry, brass. High is gonna be short notes, not TM, and then this was high and now low, short notes, not TM, and now make sure that 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 1 and 1 1. Cool. So we've got that. Now I'm gonna test if all of them respond to this guy. And as we saw, and this probably is already been fixed in earlier versions of Albion, but just for the sake of it, I'm gonna fix it here for me so it works. And I'm gonna go here and add boom, boom. And now I can control all of them. The volume. Now I'm gonna So, two very common syncastration mistakes. Problem number one, we believe sometimes that we have to hear the woodwinds louder than what we really need. So I'm just internally balancing this thing, right? I'm gonna balance. So it sounds the way I want it to sound. I'm gonna try to go for a realistic sound. If it was a trailer type of sound, maybe we would have a little bit more brass and louder low strings. But for let's go for a realistic type of sound. Okay, so two very common mistakes. Mistake number one is believing that the woodwind that we actually have to hear the woodwinds. Like when we are here, it's like I want to hear the woodwind so bad, right? I'm just gonna mute the brass just for a sec. No, we don't. The thing with the woodwinds is that they don't have the projection power that the strings and the woodwinds have, especially the strings and the brass has. The brass has more projection power. The strings not as much, and the woodwinds less. If you could put it this way, strings
In terms of volume, in terms of projection power, in terms of loudness, strings would sit in the middle, brass sounds louder, woodwind sounds softer. Let's put it this way. In terms of color, in terms of timbre, brass sits in the middle, meaning the sound of trumpets is very different than horns. Trumpets and trombones would be in like one internal family. Horns and tuba would be in another sub-internal family sort of thing, right? It's the sound variation within the family. It's bigger. The timbre range is bigger than the strings. Strings is like, yes, the viola has a darker tone compared to the violin. Yes, very different sound, but it's not that different compared to, you know, if you compare trombones and horns. So that's that. Now, woodwinds, very, very heterogeneous type of sound. So I'm gonna go back to balancing here, but just remember, in terms of loudness, in terms of volume, strings sit in the middle. It's like they can go from very piano to very forte. Now brass sounds, you know, brass can sound from piano, not as piano as the strings, but sounds piano to super forte. So that means that section has more weight, more projection power. Woodwinds not as much. All right. In terms of sound, timbre, it's different, right? Like brass is in the middle sort of thing. Woodwinds is the most heterogeneous, and then strings is the most homogeneous type of sound. So that's that. So what happens is that sometimes we've got the strings and then we double with woodwinds and we want to hear the woodwinds. It's not the way it sounds. The woodwind colors the strings sound. Woodwinds usually will color the strings sound when they are doubling, when they are doing the exact same thing. We're gonna hear it. We're gonna perceive the woodwind sound, but they are not gonna sound that loud. You're not gonna hear like clear flute unless you've got the violins performing here and then the flute performing up an octave. Then they're gonna have a higher chance to stand out. The oboe will stand out a little bit more than the flute, etc. But the only thing that you have to remember is that you wanna hear the woodwind when you mute it. It's like, oh, it was there. I wasn't, you know. Now I see that, you know, I got rid of woodwinds, but you don't have to hear them that much. It's not like I can hear the flutes now. So try to blend them in instead. And the way to do this is I prefer going from, you know, I always, when I'm adjusting anything in audio compression, balancing, I find the range, like, okay, I can clearly hear them. So this would be the loudest, and this would be like, okay, once I find the range where I have to adjust it, then I start from the highest and then I bring it down instead of going from the lowest and then bring it up, because the ear gets used to it. If I did this, the mix of the woodwinds would be too hot, most likely. Anyway. Just for the sake of it, I'm gonna move just a tiny bit, just to create a little bit of separation. The high strings a little bit to the left, the low strings a little bit to the right, just a tiny bit. We could talk ages about this. It's just follow me on this. And
the high woodwinds, we're gonna leave it them center, maybe like a tiny little bit percent, and then the low woodwinds a little bit more. It's not like here and here for the woodwind, it's more like center and left. It depends on the orchestra. Let me just. Yeah, that's where they placed it. Sometimes it's hard to hear where they actually recorded the instrument in a big room because of the reverb. So yes, the low woodwinds are a little bit. Oh dang! Let me do this again. Yeah. Well, what I'm trying to do is not. So if they actually placed the, let's say the bassoons over there, which they didn't, I don't want to move them. I'm enhancing where they put it. Just enhancing it a little bit with this, which is not the ideal way to do it, but it doesn't hurt. It really doesn't. This guy. No, it's this now. Let's go with low brass. So brass will always. So the mistake number one usually when syncostrating is number one is believing that we have to hear the woodwinds. And the mistake number one is that hiding brass, the brass or the brass sound, the brass section or the horns or whatever, especially trumpets and trombones, because they sound loud. They do, and so when we hide them behind the orchestra. We are performing like, especially with, these days it's not that problematic because we've got great sounding brass libraries, but sometimes brass libraries, like let's say that you've got the East-West Symphonic Orchestra, right? Like the Quantum Leap Symphonic Orchestra. And they brass, it's just old recordings. It's a good library, but it's not awesome. And so the brass doesn't sound like brass. So to you is like, this doesn't sound great. And then, but you want to hear the brass sound, right? So you start performing loud for the brass. Let's say it's brass. Brass. And it's like, but because it sounds so loud compared to the rest of the orchestra, because they sound louder, it's just the way it is. Then you've got the strings and brass, and it sounds like this. And to you, it's like, It's like, it sounds too loud. And then basically what you'll do is like, you'll bring it down, because you can still hear it, right? It's there, but you hear the strings because the string, especially the lower strings, always sound good. Staccato lower strings always sound good. And then you'll bring down the brass like, it's like now. But the problem is this is fake. This is a fake sound. The brass should sound much louder. And if it sounds too loud to you, It's because maybe the orchestration isn't quite done yet. Brass sounds loud. It's just it sounds louder than everyone else in the orchestra. And if it sounds too loud, if it sounds like it's not compensated to you, it's because maybe the orchestration is not finished. Maybe you need a timpani. Maybe you need to add timpani and grand cassa and snares. Maybe you need to add more loud section there so you get like a full orchestra sound. If what you are looking is a full orchestra sound, if you just have strings and brass loud fortissimo, the brass is gonna overpower the strings big time, and that's the sound that you are actually after. Maybe you don't want that sound. You want like a big orchestral sound, and then by adding bassoons there, like meaning low woodwinds, it's not gonna make it bigger. You need to add the percussion. Maybe you need to add some cinematic hits as well. Maybe you need to add more things. Maybe what the sound that you have in here requires more, enhancing the texture. But keep in mind that the brass sounds loud. It's just you may want to listen at like John Williams, or like some of the last John Williams Star Wars, the ones that he scored recently. The brass sounds super loud, and to me it's like even maybe a little bit too loud, but the brass sounds loud. Just keep that in mind. And the trumpets, there's no way when the orchestra, if you had 2T orchestra, them all performing, and you're going for the realistic sound, not because you can bring them down if you don't want the realistic sound, or you've got a specific sound in mind that you are after. It's okay. These days you can do whatever you want. But especially with high trumpets, the trumpet sounds super loud, especially the higher they go in register. It's like if you had, up here, the trumpets they can't possibly perform piano notes up here because it's so high in register. It's always sound mezzo forte to forte, even if they try to sound piano. So just know that it's gonna sound loud, okay? All right. The best way, so basically I'm just using my background to adjust all this, but what I would recommend is find a soundtrack or something where you can hear that sort of isolated hit, orchestral hit, and try to replicate it. That's the best way to adjust these things. So. I'm not gonna move this left or right because in this patch we've got trumpets and horns, trumpets and horns, and so if I move it, it's gonna be problematic. In this case, though. So see brass. Brass, this is the closed mic. Like the closed mic is not like, they've got so low brass is gonna be trombones and tubas, maybe timbassos. So it's not super close. It's like a few feet away, like a couple of 3 feet away, like this most of the times. For the cellos and double basses, the mic is down here. For brass, usually up here. And so it's the closed mics, like the closed section mic, because the brass sounds so loud. Even the closed mic have room. Remember what we talked about leakage? If you've got if you isolate the closed bassoon mic, not here, right, but with a real orchestra, the closed bassoon mic is here, but the trumpet sitting close by, you're gonna hear the trumpet sound coming in anyway, right? So Not with samples because they record everything separately, but with this one, when we isolate the, let's say the bassoons, or like the low boobins, and I'm gonna just use the close mics. What? Here. It sounds low. It sounds close. Now, I still can hear a little bit of the other mics picking up the room reverb. The other close mics that were opened, picking up some of the room reverb, and they kept them open to simulate like the real response of all the close mics picking up, not the other orchestra performing those notes, because we're just recording bassoons here basically and low clarinets, but the room response is there. So they kept the rest of the mics that you would have, the rest of the close mics that you would have in an orchestra, they kept them there just to help realism. It's not that like they put the mics just for that section. They put the mics for everyone. It's just they recorded that section because they are recreating the same orchestral sound. And so here, because bassoons sound softer, you get more of the close mic sound and not as much as of the room sound. Now, if we move to low brass, because low brass sounds louder, there's more sound pressure, and then that sound hits the walls, and there is more room sound because it's a louder sound. And even though we may select just the close mics, yes, it's a close sound, but we get more of the room sound leakage in the close mics. You can clearly hear the early reflections and all that. Just the nature of it. Just wanted to point that out. This was recorded in Air Studios, and the Air Studios is a big room with a long decay. Just that's the Spitfire sound. You get that huge sound. Cool. All right. So this is okay. Let's say that this is done. I'm gonna move this low brass a little bit here. And that is it. I'm gonna boom everyone. Right. So now that's it. Yep. So I could do the first thing that I've done, or that's gonna allow me to go faster. That's it. So I don't need this guy. Yep. All right, cool. So just takes less real estate, and I don't have the control, but sometimes I don't need the control. I created this sound, and that's what I need, and that's it. I balanced this sound. That's what I need, and that's it. Ooh, all right, so that's it. In my template, I wanted a bigger sound, and I mixed, I think it's 3 ensemble libraries or 2 ensemble libraries. I think it's it's 2. It's got sort of this thing, plus on top I've got Symphobia, which is it's a similar library, it's just older. The thing with the Spitfire, as Carlos mentioned, is like they abuse sometimes reverb. It's just we could define this. Maybe it's like the room they recorded the instruments is just like, it has that sound, which is beautiful for like. for it just empowers the sound so much. But sometimes it has a little bit too much reverb, and sometimes the aggressive it is there, but there are other libraries that maybe they have a harsher sound. I found that with Symphonia. It's just super old library, but it has that sound. It's how they performed, and it was recorded in a smaller room, so it doesn't have that much reverb. So it helps that, you know, hearing the instrument more than the room. And so that's a cool thing. When you mix them together, you balance the whole thing. Maybe you want a little bit more of Symphonia, a little less of Albion. And so you get the size of Albion in a way, but also the aggressive and harshness of Symphonia. For me, just there are different libraries. That's what I did. Just it creates a bigger, crazier sound. It's not realistic. It's just it's like having two orchestras. But hey, you know, believe it or not, we've got that sometimes direct, like classical music conductors. They sometimes record with. There's been cases of recording Mahler symphonies with two orchestras in the studio, two orchestras at the same time, like two orchestras conducting two orchestras. So, you know, cinematic music, we're not the only ones breaking the rules. So anyway, there you go. All right, cool. So I could keep going and loading the other instruments. What I would do is I would do the same thing. I just don't want to bore you with this. So hopefully that was useful. The basic patch that I would have would be like the full orchestra short notes. Is the first one that we've got here, the one that I created, this one, orchestral short. Then I would create orchestral long notes, same thing. That I did with the staccato patches, but in this case we will be using sustain or long notes type of patches. And then I created the strings, long, short, brass, long, short, and woodwinds, long, short notes. In this case, I separated high and low. Maybe you want to keep the less complicated and having just instead of two instruments, two patches, like two instruments, one patch each. You could have one instrument where you have the strings just high, right? Like instead of having that, you would have this and strings short, instead of strings high, you would have strings. Yep. And then you could get rid of this guy. And then you could do this instead. Whatever works for you. So strings, brass, woodwinds, and then for percussion, I like having, these are the speed patches or the sketching patches as I call them. I like having a very low drum, and I also I like having like an entire one patch where I've got everything. I'm just gonna duplicate this one, and then what I want to do is I'm gonna go in here, close these guys, boom, boom, and the one that I like using is instruments, sorry, Spitfire here. Sound Iron, Apocalypse percussion instruments, master. So see, this is high memory. So this patch will have more repetitions. So remember that. There's 4 repetitions here. You can hear. For the long notes, I think there's got 2. Oh no, there's 1. I believe there's just 1. And you can hear but because this is meant to be a long note. That's why. That's why they don't. Anyway, hopefully, with percussion is where they have more repetition. More than 4 usually is gonna be 8. 16, because that note, that one note, that percussive note is meant to be repeated. That's why they have more. So high memory will have more repetitions. Little or will have less repetition, like low memory usage. And then direct from disk, those are patches that are built so they don't load RAM. They load all the data information in the disk, and those are meant to be loaded if you have solid state drives. So direct from disk for solid state drives, if you're using solid state drives, it's going to lower the amount of data that's loaded on RAM. High memory, so this is going to sound better, not that much better, but it's going to load more RAM and little. So I'm going to load this one. And then the one I'm going to load is Apocalypse Ensemble Far. Yes, let's see. And it's loading. Yeah, there you go. Right. Anyway. So you've got all this range. I think it's great to have one patch like this. The problem separation, problem flexibility. It's sometimes you don't want to have this guy. This, you know, when you are as an arrangement, it works. But sometimes when you are mixing, then afterwards you may want to compress this guy, and you will need a different type of compression for this guy than what you need for this guy. All right, you may need just a little bit of a slight compression for this one and this one. It may need a little bit of a compressor and you know, and a limiter on top, just to control. It's harder to control low frequencies than it is. Oh, one thing that I would recommend each one of these instruments is I'm going here, and in Logic you can. I'm gonna go back to the orchestral instruments. Orchestral. So this one, this last, just perk. I'm gonna move this one here. No, we're just gonna keep it here. So all these instruments I would bring in. I would test. Ooh, where's this coming from? Cool. Test. Okay, cool. I'm just gonna go here. EQ. and I would low cut 48 dB per octave. There you go. Yep, and nothing here. At least, you know, have a below 20, just cut everything below 20 or below 30 something, you know. Which this means that starting at 30 hertz, it's gonna start cutting 48 dB per octave. So what means is that every octave is gonna sound 48 dB lower, starting at 20 hertz, which 20 is what you can't hear. So it's just that I get rid of everything below 20 or below 30, except for the lowest instruments. So double bass and all that, maybe I won't cut, but everything else I will cut below 20. And if it's an instrument that's meant to sound high, let's say celesta, I'll cut it around 100, 150. Everything below that gets deleted, gets, you know, filtered. And I like doing that because there is sound information, there's sound there below 20 or below 100 that we can't hear, or that's not meant to be here, but it's there. And when we start stacking tracks, then that sound that creates that rumble that we don't wanna, that first we don't wanna hear. And even if we don't hear it because it's too low, it does affect the compressors and the equalizers and the, you know, and the other plugins. And so it's easier for those plugins to work with the, you know, with just the frequencies that are meant to be there. So just cut everything. And then if you want to get rid of muddiness, you may want to cut a little bit between 150, 350. So the way you'll find this is bring up the frequency. So it's like, what do you mean cut a little bit? It's like I usually say, find the annoying frequency and you know, bring it down. Just get rid of it. And it's like, well, you know, how do I find the annoying frequency, right? And it's like, so the way you do it is you're gonna bring up this, and then you're gonna narrow it. Oops, narrow it. Narrow. Okay, like this. And then there's gonna be one frequency here that's not helping. It's gonna be a frequency that's making things sound muddy. We're gonna find that one. So when you narrow it down, it's easier to hear the frequency, and when we bring it up, it's easier to find the frequency. At this point, we are 12 dBs up, so it's going to be very, very obvious. So there are two. I see this one at 200. So when from 120 to 200, it's to me it's a little bit annoying in terms of it's making the sound muddy. Not it's taking. I wanna clear sound as much as possible. Careful sometimes because it's sometimes the resonance frequency in that. So this is C basically. So C G. So this is C. So it's getting problematic here, but maybe it's not that problematic here. So for, you know, in this B flat, it's more like the 107. Anyway, we're gonna find the. So around here, it's just making things muddy. So once we've found the area that makes things muddy, then we're gonna bring it down at -1 to -3 max. So I'm gonna bring it down -2, -2.4 or whatever. And then I'm gonna make it a little bit wider at around 1 or something like that. Not too wide to take other frequencies. That's it. So if we brought it down like a lot, so we can hear the difference. It sounds a little bit thin now, comparatively. But for sure, it sounds much cleaner. So there's some. It's not the sound that we want, obviously. We don't cut 9 dBs in any orchestral instrument, but just for you to see the difference. Now if we, let's do 5 just to hear the difference. It's not bad. Sound, but that -5, it's getting rid of frequencies that are making some of the original frequencies that are actually changing the sound that we don't want. We don't want to change the sound. We just want to get rid of some of the badness. So anything between -1 to -3, anything in the 3 dBs range is what it's gonna tweak the sound, but it's not gonna make it noticeable, so it doesn't change the true sound of that orchestral instrument or whatever it is. Okay, so -2.7, whatever. So don't expect to hear like a real difference, just a tiny bit. Now, so if you do that in every single instrument, when you have like a big arrangement, you've got all these instruments going together, that's going to help avoiding muddiness, if that makes sense. So I would do that in every instrument. So you can do this, or you could insert. I'm going to just close this one. So this one I just bypassed it. So you can use. In this case, I used an EQ that's built in the channel strip in Cubase, but you could use a plugin. Same concept here. This one goes. So the fab filter, the great thing about them when I started including them in my template, it was like VST3, which is super. That's not CPU. Doesn't. It's like you don't even notice that they're exactly. And latency. Some of them they have no latency. Most of them didn't have latency. Now some of them start having latency, and that's a bummer. The EQ does not. The Fab Filter Pro R does have a little bit of reverb, delay, yep. So just a tiny bit. Now if you've got delay it's just the delay stacks when you have one plugin after another, like one here, then another one that's delay. That's if you got 6 milliseconds and 18 milliseconds, you're having 24 milliseconds. But if you've got 6 and 6 and 6 and 6 and 6 total, it's gonna be 6 for your sequencer. Yep. So yeah, same thing here. The cool thing about this guy is when you're trying to find this annoying frequency, I'm gonna bring it up at 10 dBs, lower the Q, trying to find the frequency. You could do this. You can go here and select this guy here, and you just hear this frequency. Sometimes it's useful. It's like, ooh, there's, It's like, okay, cool, got it. Bring it down at minus, whatever, and then bring the Q. Yeah. So, yep, that's it. Cool. That's what I would do with this one. So yeah, with Logic, just with insert plugin, or you can, well, anyway, got the idea. So that's it. So you want to have one of these, one really low, separated. I like having this separated, and those are again the speed patches, sketching patches, piano, choir, horn section, trumpet section. That's the stuff that I've got in my speed patches. And then if I've got one for the strings, and I've got this, you know, if I just had like the minimum amount of patches for the strings, and I had one of these libraries where I have separation, or I've got the different patches, like violins 1, and then there I have the different articulations, and then I've got violins 2 with the different articulations, violas, etc., which I don't have in Albion, and it's I don't have in Albion. Then this would be like the minimum setup that I would do. Sometimes like, this is great, I've got all these melodic orchestral instruments, but I don't need, you know, I've got this ensemble percussion patch, but I need separation as well, you know, the same thing that I created these, you know, string patches, which are different than the speed patches. I need separation for percussion as well, and I need to have a celesta and, you know, like a piatti. I need to have, you know, separate snare, separate timpani. Those would be the basic, I call them orchestral enhancers. It's mostly orchestral percussions, you can see. So snare, timpani, tam-tam, the grand casa, basically. And then I've got a sub bomb. It's not orchestral, it's just a super low hit, and drums. It's not orchestral, drums. And then I've got the arp and celesta, and some other Mark III, cymbal swells, and piatti, which are very traditional orchestral percussion instruments. And then it's always very useful to have shakers and crottles and stuff like that to do the stuff. So that's that. All right, just opening my main template. Why? Okay, because I wanted to explain these guys. All right, so if you go the simple approach and you don't have that many tracks, there's no real need sometimes to regroup these tracks. The bigger your template goes, it makes sense sometimes to group the tracks. And so basically what I'm saying is that the output of each track doesn't go straight to the stereo output, to like the master stereo output. Before it hits the master output, the master bus, it goes through a series of stems or buses, and that's what I do. Oh, good thing that we saved the other project. I want to do something. So, if you're mixing in the box, like if you're mixing in the same composing project, sometimes you may want to enhance some of the instruments. So you may want to add some reverb or stuff like that. So I'm gonna add an effects, and this is gonna be if I filter Pro R. That's reverb. And let's talk about reverbs real quick. We didn't cover this thing. Okay, so there are different approaches when it comes to reverb. I usually don't have reverbs in my composing project. I do, but it's just in case I am not mixing afterwards. So I usually compose without reverbs, or I compose with reverbs just to hear the sort of like the final sound. And when I export for mixing, I get rid of the reverbs, because I can use better reverbs when I am mixing than when I'm composing. When I'm composing, I have to use very optimized reverbs that sound good, but not the best reverbs. And when I'm mixing, I can use any reverb that I want. Maybe some of them won't be, you know, don't use that as much CPU, and others will be super CPU intensive, and I don't care because I am mixing. Usually I compose first, then I export audio files, like each track or each stem, and then I mix in a separate project. In that separate project, because I just have audio and I don't have all these tracks loaded that, you know, take CPU power. I can do whatever I want. I can load more plugins that I can in my template. And so, but if you have a simple template and you, or if you prefer mixing in your composing template, or if you don't plan to mix or whatever, or you just want to have reverbs loaded here to sort of hear with the final sound, there are two approaches. Well, there are many approaches. Let's talk about three. You could insert reverbs in each track, which You know, if you just had 10 tracks like this, you can do this, because there you've got enough CPU power in your computer. If you've got 500 tracks or 2,000 tracks, it doesn't make sense inserting reverbs in each one of these tracks because you would kill your CPU. Okay, that's option number one. Option number two is if you have lots of tracks and you decided to route those tracks to a smaller amount of buses or stems. Let's say you've got 500 tracks and then you've got 20 stems, you could insert the reverbs in those stems. That's the option that I like most, because then when you export those stems, you've got the flexibility. Let me just describe the third option and you'll see why the third option can sometimes be a little bit limiting when it comes to flexibility when exporting. The other option is that you can have 3 reverbs loaded in your template, short, mid, and long, for example. And then depending on how much reverb you want for one specific instrument, then you'll go here, for example, and then you'll send, this is gonna be, if I filter, long reverb. This is an effects track, and I'm gonna load this cathedral 3.8 second reverb. Okay, we'll talk about this in a sec. All right, talk about this in a sec. And then you have the long high strings, and you want these to have a little bit of reverb, so you're gonna send this to the long reverb. And now the strings sound with no reverb. And as I start sending, you'll see this coming in here. And there's reverb. And there's maybe too much reverb, you would adjust it. So now, if you've got lots of tracks, and you have 500 tracks, 20 basses, and then you've got 3 reverbs, and from these 500 tracks, you are sending, okay, so for the long strings, I want the long reverb. For the long woodwinds, I want the long reverb. For the long brass, I want the long reverb. And then for staccatos, I want the short reverb. What happens is that when you are exporting stems, the output of these 3 buses, where do they go? Do they go to the stereo master bus? And so when you export the buses, then the reverb does not get exported in each one of the buses. Or do you route it to what stem are you gonna route it to? Because you may have a stem for the high long strings, another one for the high short strings, another one for the low, and then the long reverb, where does it go? To the master, and then the buses get exported dry, which is most likely what you want. Anyway, having them as separate, like the 3 reverbs that I just described, gives you less options, but in practice, what Carlos just said, at the end of the day, is most likely 99% of the times is what you're gonna want anyway, because when you're exporting the stems, is because it's either because you're gonna mix and you're gonna want the tracks dry, so with no effects. The only problem is that sometimes you are gonna export this subset of stems, like orchestra, percussion, synths, which is not for mixing, is for delivering to the dub stage. And in that case, you're gonna want them mixed. You're gonna want them wet. They just want to have separation so they can, rebalance or mute some of them if they don't want the shaker and they want the percussion separated from the orchestra or the synth separated from the orchestra. This is common in library music. You'll submit the track and also you'll submit the stems, but they are not gonna mix. It's just if they need to rebalance things, or if they wanna wash down the mix, and they just want to have, let's say, the strings and like the orchestra in this specific moment. They don't want to get the, the piano that's maybe exporting this other. So when you're exporting for mixing, you're gonna use these ones. It's okay to have like the 3 reverbs option in 3 basses. But if you are exporting like this, like you're exporting for library music or for the movie and the double stage, and you're exporting the stems that you will import into Pro Tools and you'll send it to the music editor. They don't need to have it dry, so they can mix afterwards. They want the music sounding great, your mix, and that means that each stem should have its reverbs. Which in that case, most of the times, anyway, it goes through your mixing process and then you'll export the stem, so it still will be okay. Anyway, it depends on the project, depends on, does it make sense? If it makes sense to me, but because, because I've done it a few times, and sometimes I know that I'm not expanding on something, just I don't want to go too deep, but hopefully it makes sense. All right, so if I had, with the having the reverbs loaded as separate basses thing, where you can, what we just did, so we can do stuff like this. All right, so I usually have 3 reverbs: long reverb, mid, and I would usually have, I don't use this that much anymore, but this is very useful anyway. Like the basic approach would be long reverb, mid reverb, and short reverb. But sometimes you can go a little bit more. And what I would have is a panoramic reverb, and that's a long sustained, for long sustained strings, sustained brass, choir tracks that need wide wet sound, and that's exactly what we've got here. Let me just describe this reverb real quick. This is first a long reverb, okay. It's not just long, it simulates a big space. Now, remember, big space doesn't mean long reverb. It doesn't necessarily mean long reverb. That depends on the acoustic treatment of the space. A space like this, if it was like super hard walls, it would have a long reverb. It would sound like in a small space with a long reverb. It's like the echo chamber, that's what it is. That's what it would be. And a large space could have a short reverb. It's harder to have a big space with a short reverb because you have to have super absorbent materials in the walls and ceiling and floor, but you could. It's easier to get a longer reverb in a big space. Cathedrals, churches, stuff like that have a huge reverb because generally the materials of the walls are usually stone, right? So it's hard, so the sound reflects, and because it has to travel longer spaces, then it's also it's a longer reverb. It's lots of reflections because of hard, floor, ceiling, and walls, and also has to travel longer spaces, so the reverb becomes longer. But that's generally, you can have a long, a big space with a short reverb. Okay. So that's that. I call this panoramic reverb, but basically it's just long reverb for long sustained strings, sustained brass, choir that needs a lot of reverb, tracks that need a wide wet sound. So this is long, and it's also wide, right? Here's where you can control how wide the reverb, not the sound, the reverb is. So if we had, so I'm gonna make, so this send at the moment is post fader, which means that if I bring down the fader, the send doesn't send sound to this effects bus, to this reverb. If I make it a pre-fader, I just moved it, post fader, pre-fader, then when I bring down the volume, it's not gonna send direct sound to the reverb, but the send is still gonna sound. So, which this means that at this point, I just hear reverb. I don't hear direct sound, I just hear reverb. Because the mix is at 100% and I'm not sending any direct sound, I'm just sending through the send. Anyway. So in Zoom it's hard to hear, but this is a mono reverb because it just brought this down to mono, and then this is a stereo reverb, and it's wide. You can widen it even more. Super wide reverb or crazy wide. 120%. So anyway, in general, it's gonna be pre-fader because you wanna be able to control when you bring down volume. You want it to go away. Otherwise, the reverb mix is gonna change if you change the volume of your track, and you wanna keep the mix consistent. So that's that. If you're inserting the reverb, you don't have this problem. If you're working with sends, then good. Then pre-fader, post-fader, meaning if you bring down the fader, the reverb goes away. It affects the amount of send. So post-fader. If it's pre-fader, then it means that it's like the send goes before the fader. So here's the send, and I'm sending 50%. Then I change the fader. It's okay. It doesn't affect this guy because it's pre-fader. If it is post-fader, it goes after. So the fader is here and the send is here. If I'm sending a 50%, but I bring down the fader, I don't get a signal here. So right now it's post-fader. It's not intuitive because you don't really know what's post-fader and pre-fader. So this is post-fader because when I bring down the volume, the reverb goes away. Now, keep in mind, if you bring when you are using reverb as a send, so as a bus that you are getting to the reverb through a send, then the mix has to be at 100%, and you're gonna decide the mix based on how much send you're sending, right? So this is 0%. It's totally dry at the moment because the reverb doesn't receive anything. If I bring this to 100%, like 0, so this is 100%. Now the mix is 50% because I've got 50% of my signal is dry and 50% is like this wet sound. So if I want like a 55%, which is typical, then I would have to bring this, play by ear, but there's quite a bit of dry sound and just a little bit of reverb. And if I, maybe this is like a 10%. So this guy, when you're using the reverb as a bass, it has to be at the mix 100%. It would be different if you'd be inserting. I'm just gonna stop this. Now this is the strings long high track. If I insert it, if I insert here the reverb, there you go. So this is 100% wet. Right. And now you can play with this. Dry. 10%. But this would be a different scenario. So I'm gonna get rid of this guy. All right, So that's that. So that would be a long reverb. Then I would have an impact reverb for spiccato, brass tabs, woodwind, etc. So spiccato, if we had something like, let's say, spiccato, cello, and that would go here, and that would go here. Boom, last, boom, boom, spiccato, cello's full spiccato. Yep. All right, super dry. It's not like a dry, like closed mic type of dry, but it's a small room. So that's that. If impact type of reverb, just to create like a little bit of a space, this would be this reverb is shorter than the panoramic reverb. It simulates a big room. It still simulates a big room, but it's just a quicker decay because if we just had this instrument, but usually we will have this in context. If we just had this instrument, then this guy here, then going here could be an option. And this sometimes we hear stuff like this when it's just one hit. But most likely what we are gonna need is to have like a short, like I'm gonna call this impact. And this would be, still we're gonna simulate a large or very large space, like this one. Where is it? Horn Studio Large. Which is big, but it has a shorter decay. And I'm gonna mute this one, and I'm gonna go to the impact reverb. Okay, so. Just creates that. It's still a wide, big space simulation type of reverb, but faster decay. Cool, so that's that. All right. So that's the types of reverb. Those are the two main. Then I would have a reverb for bass instruments. I almost never use this. Let me just real quick tell you how I configure my reverbs. It's the same approach that when I EQ the instruments. Every good reverb will have some sort of EQ. This line here, it EQs the reverb, not the sound, not the original instrument, the sound of the instrument. It EQs the reverb. So let me just make this pre-fader bring down. So we just hear the reverb at this point. Can I bring this up? So this is the reverb. This is the reverb, so. But basically, you want to get rid of all the low and muddiness. Sometimes you can cut even more. Sometimes you just want to add a bright reverb. For this long reverb, instead is more like It's a very warm reverb. So with my reverbs, I EQ the reverb to get rid of all the matte. Sometimes you want just a bright reverb, then that's what you do. In this case, this is like the typical cathedral reverb is a long reverb, very warm type of reverb. So that's what I wanted, a cathedral type of sound. And the reason why cathedrals and churches are warm reverbs is because when the sound travels, the air filters the high frequencies first. So that's why, because it's so big, long spaces, then at the end it's a warmer reverb, because the high frequencies have less energy, so they get lost first. So this guy filters the overall sound of the reverb, and this guy filters the decay of the reverb. It's like a delay, that you can filter the delay, and each repetition, the blah, bah, 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 bah. Each repetition sounds a little bit warmer because it's cutting the high frequencies. That's sort of like a similar effect. It's sort of like filters the decay, the high frequencies of decay. You can filter whatever you want. You can filter whatever. Okay, so that's that. Cool. All right, so impact reverb, long reverb, impact reverb, then reverb for the low instruments. So let's say that you've got a reverb just for the low instruments, and then I would have a different reverb type of reverb that I would have for low instruments. Maybe is I have a low instrument, but I want to enhance the brightness by using a reverb. Then maybe it would be like a bright reverb just for low instruments, but it wouldn't be as long. It'd be shorter, because low instruments tend to get muddy quicker. If we add reverb, they get more muddy. So it wouldn't be as wide and long reverb as the panoramic reverb. So we would keep it more centered, because low frequencies want to be here in the center, and then it wouldn't be such a long reverb. I wouldn't have as much reverb for the low instruments. I generally don't have reverb for the low instruments, especially because low instruments can either be orchestral instruments, and they already have the room reverb, so I most of the times don't need more reverb, or percussion low instruments that are percussion, and I don't want reverb in the percussion because it's usually short, fast notes, or they could be synths. Sometimes it's nice to have reverb. So reverb is, most of the times we're going to have reverb for synths, because we want to make them sound a little bit not as harsh, right? And so reverb helps a lot. With low synths as well. That's when I would maybe have reverb for low instruments. And then I would have reverb for low percussion, and reverb for other percussion. Usually it's a super short reverb type of reverb, and I like having separated the same as here. If I have reverb for low percussion, I want to have it separated. Sometimes I have reverb for like a single hit type of percussion, like the type of like the big hit, maybe the big timpani hit, that I want to add reverb just to that hit that sort of fills the entire room type of sound. It's like a non-realistic one percussive hit, stuff like that. And then reverb for synths and reverb for special effects, like reversed and stingers and Brahms and stuff like that. Okay. So you could have long, mid, short. When I had reverbs in basses, that's what I had. Okay. So that's it. So if you're configuring this, you may want to come back to this point in the video and go back with what I did. But again, panoramic reverb would be long, it would be wide. Usually cut the frequencies, and if you want like a mellower warm reverb, just bring down the high frequencies a little bit, cut the lows. Impact reverb, cut the lows again. Simulate a big space, something like this, a cathedral or like a big hall or like a big studio. Just bring down make it short. Okay. Then we've got, and there, this one can be a little bit brighter if you want. Cut the lows as well. Then always cut the lows. And then for the reverb for brass instruments, it depends. If you need reverb for the brass instruments, what do you need? What are you trying to create there? If you need to enhance it, to create a little bit of reverb for the low instruments to sort of like brighten them up with reverb, then it could be similar to the impact reverb a little bit, just like a 1.5, 2 seconds max, if they are long notes. and then maybe just brighten them and cut the low frequencies. The low frequencies are there in the low instruments, so you don't want to add more reverb there. It's gonna be rare that you need. So cut even a little bit more, because you got, the more you cut, the cleaner the sound. And then you can add a little bit of high, you know, like, don't cut too much because that would sound weird, but you know, that's that. And then reverb for low percussion and for other percussion. Usually reverb for percussion is going to be very similar to impact reverb. It's just configure, tweak it differently, so it's a different reverb. Maybe use a different patch initially, so you use a different algorithm. Maybe instead of the horns studio that you used initially, maybe you are using like the dark yet light space, or like console hall, LA, Sydney, Vienna, whatever it is. So the thing with reverbs is that what we are doing with reverbs, and the reason why we are using different reverbs, is because when we use one overall reverb, it's we are losing separation. We are putting just like one reverb for everyone. You know, basically it puts everyone like together, makes them sound together. If we're using separate reverbs, we're creating different spaces for different groups, which is like if we record the different groups separately, that gives us separation. Different reverbs, different at the end. Let me just pull up this. Different reverbs at the end is just different colors. If we are grouping things by color, same reverb, then less separation. If we're creating the different colors for reverbs, then more separation. That's why we use different reverbs. Is it going to create a natural, realistic sound? Nope. But we are not going after a natural sound when we are mixing the orchestral music. If you want to sound like a real orchestra, don't mix. Just do, you know, create a good arrangement, good composition, good arrangement, good orchestration. That's it. We've got great enough. You've got great sounds, great libraries. We don't need to mix afterwards. If we want to sound not better, but if we're going to go beyond the orchestral sound and enhance the orchestral sound and sound more modern, more cinematic, or more trailer, whatever it is, then we're going to need to mix, and it's totally fine. It's just enhancing the sound, creating the magic, creating more movement, rebalancing, enhancing with reverb, EQing to avoid muddiness, compressing to control dynamics, all these things. We will get there. Okay. Boom, pues, so that's it. Then we've got the low percussion and the other percussion. Generally, low percussion, same thing than with low instruments, for bass instruments, and other percussion, same thing, same thing as impact reverb. Keep it short. Reverb for synth. I usually have a reverb for long synths and a reverb for short synths, and it's similar to these two guys. It's just two separate patches, but you could use this one. Sometimes using the orchestral reverb, the reverb that you use, the panoramic reverb, like the long sustained strings for like long synths, helps the synths blend with the orchestra, and sometimes that's what we want. If we want to create separation, then it would make sense to have one reverb for synths. For example, we've got orchestra and short, pulsing synth, and we want to keep it separated. And then we would have a synth, just reverb just for synth, and then reverb for special effects. That would, depending on the special effect, if it's a Brahms, it's gonna be different than if it's a hit or if it's a stinger, right? It's gonna be a stinger or a reversed. Maybe we wanna, for a reversed or a stinger, we want a really long reverb at the end, so it sort of like enhances the last, and then like along, whatever it is, okay? Just a different reverb. These are the ones that, have to be very specific. Long, usually warm, wide, and simulating a big space. This same thing in general, it's gonna be brighter instead of warm. It's gonna be still a big space, but it's gonna be a shorter decay. In general, we're gonna keep it wide because we wanna simulate that big space. The rest, you can experiment.
All right, that's it. end of the class. I hope you enjoyed the class. I hope you got some value out of this class. Now it's time for you to actually put these concepts to action. Don't just come here and join this and watch the class and that's it. If there was something, at least if there's one thing that you're like, this is cool, this is a good idea, even if you think that everything that I explained was crap, if you found one thing, sit down in front of your computer and make that change in your template, add those new things in your template, try it, test it, compose a little bit, see if it actually works, see if what I say is BS or it's actually useful. Test it, try it. Passive learning, sort of like, coming here and just watching this, it's great. It's fantastic information. You're going to retain 10, 20, 30% max of what I've said. If you put it to practice, you're going to make it yours for forever. All right? Tomorrow we're going to be crossing to the other side kind of thing. Like we are music theory. We're gonna talk about the basics of harmony, a little bit of orchestration as well. Tomorrow we're gonna talking about the basic things that even if you never even seen a piano, even if you don't play the piano, even if you've never composed, we're gonna be talking about super basic concepts that are so powerful if used correctly. All right, so that's what we're gonna be talking about tomorrow. Basics of music theory and harmony from scratch. Even if you've never composed before, it's gonna be a lot of fun. Very basic concepts. Even if you've composed before, even if you've got experience, even if you've worked on projects, still attend this class because these very simple concepts are very powerful again if applied correctly. That's it from me. Thanks for attending. Best of luck. Let's write great music. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.